Joining us now to further discuss the legacy of the Tulsa race riots is host and managing editor of Roland Martin Unfiltered, friend of the show, Mr. Roland Martin himself. Roland, appreciate you talking with us tonight.
Lindsay, glad to be with you, and I'm actually here at the offices of the Black Wall Street Times, a digital operation just launching, and they're tied to this here, and they put this magazine out, so certainly glad to tell this story.
You were there earlier today when they unveiled that powerful mural at the Greenwood Cultural Center. Tell us what that moment was like.
Well, I mean, it was difficult. Dr. Tiffany Crutcher said, "We're standing on a crime scene." She said, "This is fertile ground." And if you think about it, how Americans look at the area where the Twin Towers were in terms of as sacred ground, we have to think about the same thing, the 36-block area that compromised Greenwood. And unfortunately, in this country, we have not had this reckoning to deal with our past and how we are still being impacted by the racial terror that hit this community 100 years ago.
How big of a step is this, would you say, in our nation's ongoing healing process? I heard you just there a moment ago say we haven't had the reckoning. So many people are saying this has been the year of the racial reckoning.
Well, when I say racial reckoning, it can't last 6 months or a year. If you think about the first Reconstruction after slavery, that was 10 to 12 years, 1865 to 1877. Then you had the Great Compromise of 1877, which ushered in Jim Crow, which lasted 92 years. If you say the second Reconstruction was Brown versus Board of Education in 54, going through the Fair Housing Act in 68, that's 14 years. But we still haven't dealt with the money. And so you have this huge divide going on here because African Americans tied to the Greenwood Cultural Center, they have a different commemoration than you have the City Commission. So even with this, you still have white, black, you still have different views here. And so if Tulsa and Oklahoma and America doesn't deal with the economic calamity, the economic massacre that resulted from this, but not just Tulsa, Lindsay. Black massacres took place Chicago, Springfield, Ohio, East St. Louis, Vicksburg, Slocum, Colfax, Opelousas, Louisiana, Rosewood, St. Bernard Parish, New Orleans, Charleston, Wilmington, Atlanta, Memphis, Philly, Washington, New York, Detroit. And so there have been these massacres all in American history that America has never confronted. We sort of just moved on and said, hey, y'all get over it. America's never gotten over 9/11. Why should we get over Tulsa and these other massacres?
When we talk about progress, there has certainly been progress that's been made in the last 100 years, though there are those who would disagree as far as just how much. What would you personally like to see happen within the next year, especially on the heels of this one-mark anniversary since George Floyd's death?
Well, first of all, specifically Tulsa and Oklahoma, they have got to have a victims compensation fund. There are still 3 original survivors. Their descendants should be compensated. The federal government created a 9/11 victims compensation fund. That should happen here. The funds that are being spent, that are being raised here, that should be going to victims and their descendants. And so they're creating, in many ways, a tourist attraction. This is what I say. You've had black pain that's now being turned into black porn, and folks are still benefiting. And so what has to happen is we've got to have folks deal with the reality of how race has impacted every single facet of our society. The corporations that pledged $50 billion after George Floyd, most of that money hasn't even been spent. They got the PR hit. They've got to be held accountable. We've got to hold corporations accountable, the federal government accountable for what we see when you look at the health stats, the economic stats, because African Americans are still being massacred, if you will, assaulted every single day by the history of this country. People today, white Americans today, many of them say, well, that was all in the past. My parents are 74. They were impacted by the racist fair housing laws that were in place. There are African Americans still living today who were the victims of Jim Crow. So we can't just say this thing, it goes back to slavery. No, we still have people living today who were impacted. Keep in mind, Lizzie, I was born November 14th, 1968. Which means that I was born into America where I was not a fully free American. My nieces were the first generation of my family to be born fully free. That tells you a lot, and I'm 52. So we look at this thing as so far back. No, 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 no. It was just around the corner, and so we've got to confront it and deal with it, and if it's tough, suck it up. But we have to deal with it. If we don't, we will never be able to confront America's history with race.
And that gives us good perspective. Yeah, they're just 52 years old. President Biden plans on traveling to Oklahoma on Tuesday to commemorate the 100th anniversary of this attack. He also plans on meeting with some of the survivors. How impactful of a gesture do you think this is by the president?
I think it's important for President Joe Biden to be here, but not just with his presence. He must also it must be reflected in his policies. I would love to see President Biden tell this state and this city that they must confront the economic reality and create a victims compensation fund. He needs to say the and art displays and museums are simply not enough to deal with the past. You must deal with the damage that was done. Black Wall Street was rebuilt, but I need people to think about this here. What if African Americans didn't have to rebuild? What if land wasn't stolen? What if you didn't have stores burned? Where would African Americans be in Tulsa, in Oklahoma, and in America if we did not have to keep starting over and over and over? If you study American history, whenever you had black success, it was followed by white backlash. Going from, again, 243 years of slavery to Reconstruction, Jim Crow laws, going through the Civil Rights Movement, going through lynchings. You've always had that. And so President Joe Biden needs to speak directly to America and confront the folks who are trying to get rid of critical race theory, who don't want the issue. You know, the governor of this state signed a bill dealing with what's taught in the classrooms. America has always told his story and not real history.
Mr. Roland Martin, not only an author and a show host, but also a historian. We thank you so much for breaking it down for us.
Thanks, Lindsay. I appreciate it.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.